Now, once you have figured out how to identify clauses, the last piece in this unit of grammar study is classifying sentences according to their structural makeup. And by that we mean how many independent or subordinate clauses they have in the sentence. So for example, a simple sentence is going to be exactly that. One independent clause. No subordinate clauses. This is our most basic sentence. Now it can have phrases, it can have other modifiers, it just cannot have any subordinate clauses. For example, Cora, first subject, and Kareem, first subject, bought, action verb. So even though this is a compound subject with Cora and Kareem, they're doing one action. They bought supplies, direct object. This is a simple sentence. Later, they drove to school and decorated the cafeteria for the Ecology Club's annual banquet. Get that prep off here. So they drove, action verb, and they decorated, action verb. Who did the driving and the decorations? They did. Again, you can have a compound verb or a compound subject, but I still have simple sentences. This and is simply combining verbs, not two independent clauses. Now when we get to a compound sentence, this is where we get two or more independent clauses. But we still have no subordinate clauses in this. Now, it's going to be important to remember how we join compound sentences. Remember, we can join them with a comma, fanboy, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. We can join them with a semicolon and some other sort of conjunction or just semicolon. So those are the things that you are going to want to watch for. So for example, Cora hung colorful streamers from the ceiling and Kareem set party favors on the table. I think it's very useful to go ahead and just mark your subject and verb pairs. Set is your action verb 2 and Kareem set. Now all I have to figure out is, do I have two independent clauses or do I have one independent and one subordinate? And this comma and tells me I have two independents, and so that makes this a compound sentence. After an hour they took a short break, then they went back to work. So action verb took, who took, they took. Went, action verb, who went, they did. I have a semicolon, I have two subject-verb pairs, then they went back to work, can stand alone. After an hour they took a short break, can stand alone. That makes this a compound sentence. They agreed to not take any more breaks, semicolon, otherwise, comma, they would be late getting home. So again, I've got my action verb agreed, who agreed, they agreed. Would be is my action verb over here, who or what would be, they would be. Now I have a semicolon with a subordinating conjunction otherwise. Looking at this, getting home makes me nervous that this has somehow got a clause in it, but there's no subject to this getting part. And so and actually would be getting is your action verb, late is an interrupter, adverb. So it isn't even a participle back here, so it doesn't matter. Two independent simple sentences joined makes this compound. Now we want to be careful with this example right here. When I go through and mark to pass the time, they talked, action verb, who or what talked, they did, about school. Here's an and, told is an action verb, who or what told, oh, they are still telling. This is a simple sentence. I have one verb doing two actions. To pass the time, they talked, action verb, subject, comma, and action verb, told, or they told. So here I have, in the spirit, the same sentence, but I have just a conjunction joining compound verbs. Here I have a coordinating conjunction joining comma and two independent. That makes this a compound sentence. Now when I go on to complex sentences, they are going to do that. They're going to be just a little more complex. And this is one independent clause plus one or more subordinate clause. So again, when I go through and do my subject and verb pairs, I'm going to see that I either have compound or complex. Then depending on if they can stand alone, I get my label. So when they had finished their work, comma, they, there's my clue right there. Commas alone don't separate independent clauses. They complemented each other on the results. The word when is also a clue. So had finished, action verb. Who had finished? They had. Complemented, action verb. Who complemented? They complemented. There's no other verb pairs. So I have two pairs of subjects and verbs. So I either have a complex sentence or a compound sentence. When they had finished their work, can't stand on its own, so that makes it subordinate. So I have one subordinate, one independent. This is a complex sentence. My father gave me the locket that had belonged to his grandmother. Gave, action verb. Who or what gave? My father gave. Had belonged, action verb. Who or what had belonged? That. Again, that seems weird, but remember those relative pronouns. The word that is replacing locket. So here's a subject-verb pair. Here's a subject-verb pair. My father gave me the locket. That's independent. That stands by itself. That had belonged to his grandmother. That's subordinate. Can't stand by itself. That means this is a complex sentence. After I wrote my report, I proofread it and made a clean copy. So wrote, action verb. Who or what wrote? I did. Report is my direct object. Comma. That's a clue. After is a clue. Proofread. Action verb. Proofread. And made, there's another action verb. Who or what proofread and made? I did. Since there's no comma here, I know that I'm dealing with a compound verb. So I have an independent and a subordinate. Makes this a complex sentence. Now the last structure type is exactly what you would expect. It is a compound complex sentence. So we have two or more independent clauses and one or more subordinate clause. So at minimum we're looking at 3 pairs of subjects and verbs here. There may be more, but at minimum, to qualify as a compound complex, I need 3 sets of subjects and verbs, 2 independents and 1 subordinate. So Cora waited for just the right moment to ask Kareem to the banquet, comma, and, there's a hint. He promptly accepted her invitation, comma, adding that he had been planning to ask her. So let's go ahead and try to find all of our subjects and verbs. So waited, action verb. Who waited? Cora waited for just the right moment to ask. There's an infinitive, Kareem to the banquet, no more subjects and verbs, comma, and. He accepted, there's another verb. Who accepted? He did. Accepted what? Invitation, direct object, adding that He had been planning, action verb 3, who had been planning, he had been planning. Now it is possible to join 3 independent clauses, but this comma and, it would be like a list. You would have independent 1, independent 2, comma, and independent 3. And when I look at this, it's clear that this section right here is a subordinate clause. He promptly accepted her invitation as independent. Cora waited for just the right moment to ask. Independent. That makes this compound complex. So if you take your time to label all of your pieces, this is not as bad as it initially seems. The instructor explained how a splint is made, and we practiced the technique on one another. So when I go, I see my comma and. So I'm not sure if I'm dealing with a compound or a compound complex right now. So I have instructor, action verb, explained. Splint is made. Here's an action verb with splint. Practiced. Here's my third action verb. And we. Now, how a splint is made, can that stand alone? No. There's my subordinate. The instructor explained, independent, and we practiced, independent. This is compound complex. Airlines know that some passengers will never appear. Therefore, extra seats are booked for more flights. So no, action verb, airlines know. Will appear, there's another set of action verbs. Who or what will appear? Passengers will appear. Are booked is an action verb. Who or what are booked? Seats are booked. Well, this tells me that I have an independent clause following. The semicolon tells me I have an independent clause. Extra seats are booked for more flights. One independent. The airlines know that some passengers, the airlines know, independent, that some passengers will never appear is the direct object noun clause. I have a clause, independent, independent. This is a compound complex sentence. And that is how you classify sentences according to structure.